Welcome back to a very special episode of the What We're Watching podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Jenny, and today we're talking about The Devil Wears Prada.
And why are we talking about it, Jenny?
Because it's our Podiversary week!
Yay! Guys, we made it to a year. It's been one whole year of the What We're Watching podcast. I can't believe it, actually.
I can't either, and when we started the podcast, I think both of us said, hey, we're gonna stick with it for a year and just see what happens. We did. We made it, and we're gonna keep going.
Yeah, we're not stopping, don't worry. But it has been so fun to get to know you guys and to get to talk to you on social media and hear what you think and just, I don't know, I feel like we were all craving that sense of girlhood nostalgia, and the fact that we can all talk about it together and rewatch all our favorite movies together just makes me so happy. I love it.
It's so much fun. We feel like you guys are our friends too, and yeah, we just really appreciate you. I think the best part about starting this podcast has been getting to know all of you, so thank you.
Yeah, when we get messages from you guys, we fangirl. If you want to talk to us about a certain episode or request an episode or something, it always means a lot to us. So we appreciate it, and we love the community that we're building. So make sure you guys share the pod with your besties so we can all talk.
We love you guys. Thank you so much for listening.
We also made a Spotify playlist with some of our favorite soundtrack songs from every movie and TV show that we've covered so far. So if you go on Spotify and you go to our podcast page and you click More Like This, it'll come right up. So you guys should listen to it. It's been really fun to put together, all of the most iconic songs from every single episode that we've done. It's been really fun.
I was listening to it all this morning, and it was so fun to listen to while getting ready. It just reminded me of, those montages in the Lizzie McGuire movie when she's dancing around her bedroom?
Yes.
That was me this morning. And it's kind of like we burned you a CD or we put music on your iPod. It's just a fun, nostalgic thing, and I hope you guys enjoy.
And don't forget, if you guys have been loving the podcast, leave us a 5-star rating.
Now, we chose this movie, The Devil Wears Prada, because you guys picked it. You voted for it. We had a huge bracket. I'm shocked this one won, actually.
It's just iconic.
It is iconic, and some of you were very sad that John Tucker Must Die didn't make it, but those were the top two. And, maybe we'll do John Tucker Must Die in a few weeks for you.
We're also sharing a really fun bonus episode this Friday in celebration of our Podiversary week, and it's going to be a Q&A with all the questions that you guys have asked us.
And that day is specifically our 1-year anniversary, so it's going to be very exciting.
Yay. The logline for The Devil Wears Prada is, Andy is a recent college graduate with big dreams. Upon landing a job at prestigious Runway magazine, she finds herself the assistant to a diabolical editor, Miranda Priestley. Andy questions her ability to survive her grim tour as Miranda's assistant without getting scorched.
What do you think about this movie?
I loved it so much growing up. This would have been in my top 5 as a teen, for sure. Loved it. I've seen it so many times. To me, this aged so poorly. It hurt me deeply to watch it again, and that made me so sad because I love all the people in this movie, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci, Meryl Streep, iconic cast, iconic story. It disappointed me how it was so early 2000s, I feel like half the conversations that they were having were about being a size 0, And that sucked, but I still love all the characters, and I really like the overall plot. The Hearst Andy story, I think, is a great one. What about you?
Yeah, I think if you strip the weight comments away from this movie, it still really holds up and is just a really great movie. I actually think it was very airtight. The plot and everything was just so good.
Yep.
And the characters were great, and I loved it so much, but I do agree that was what rubbed me the wrong way this time.
And I don't even remember that bothering me before, which just, I think, shows, partially, I think, our age when we were younger watching it. It just, you don't think critically about movies, but also it was so normalized at the time.
So normal. Yeah. Yeah. It is really interesting. I will say, though, I didn't grow up watching this movie. I watched it as an adult. I actually think I've only seen it one other time before. I remember it being one of my favorite movies, but I just hadn't rewatched it. And I watched it on an airplane originally, I think.
This is a good airplane movie.
It really is. Honestly, would watch on an airplane again. Highly recommend. I think this might be one of my favorite movies still of this time, even though it may not have aged perfectly.
So this movie came out in 2006. And it's based on a novel with the same name that came out in 2003. And that novel is by Lauren Weisberger. It's inspired by the author's stint as a personal assistant to Anna Wintour at Vogue. So it makes sense that a lot of people draw those comparisons. And then 20th Century Fox bought the rights to the story in 2003, so the same year that the novel came out, but then the project wasn't officially greenlit until Meryl Streep was attached, which makes sense. I think that happens a lot with movies. They wait to see who, which big star, like which big name is going to get attached to it before they actually make it, so.
It's so interesting to me when a book gets optioned for a screenplay immediately. We just talked about that last week in A Simple Favor, but I was like, how do they decide? How do they know?
It wouldn't surprise me, and I don't know how this works, if there are like whole teams of people that are just looking for new books, or I know even now people will, I think, buy the rights to like news stories and short stories, and they're getting creative. I wouldn't be surprised if they way overbuy those rights and then they just sit on them, and it's just so that nobody else gets them, and then if they decide to make it a few years down the line, then maybe they do.
That would make sense. Yeah, I could see that. Also, I believe the author of the book cameos in the movie as the twins' nanny.
Oh, that's fun. So like we said, there's a lot of speculation, obviously, that Miranda Priestley is based on the Vogue editor, which makes sense because of the novel. How could it not be? And because of this, apparently a bunch of designers and other people in the fashion industry didn't want to cameo as themselves in the movie because they were worried about Anna Wintour,
being upset?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Prada was the first one to be like, oh, I think Anna won't care. We'll do it.
I also read that Anna was initially skeptical of the film, but later said that she liked it, particularly Meryl Streep's performance.
Because she was like, that is me.
Yeah.
I relate to her.
I guess if it's going to be anybody, if Meryl Streep is playing you, how can you complain,
Oh my gosh, can you imagine the honor to have Meryl Streep play you?
Absolutely not.
Apparently there wasn't much collaboration with the Vogue team, but the production designer did get a glimpse of Wintour's office and recreated it for Miranda Priestley.
Wow.
And the director, David Frankel, said he was able to recreate the office so authentically that I was told Anna redecorated hers immediately after the movie came out.
Yeah, because imagine people in the Vogue office going into, watching the movie and then going into her office and being like, aha, I knew it.
It just makes me laugh. And then 6 years ago, Meryl Streep and Anna Wintour did a video for Vogue together.
Okay.
And it's very interesting to see them in the same room.
I would like to see that. I need to go watch it. But that makes me feel good, that it's all nice now,
Yeah.
So this movie was made by a team that you guys might recognize. It was directed by David Frankel, like Jenny said. He also directed Inventing Anna, a couple episodes of The Morning Show, Hope Springs, and Marley and Me, among many other things. And then it was produced by Wendy Feinerman, and she also produced Forrest Gump, P.S. I Love You, One for the Money, and Stepmom, among a bunch of other things. So, yeah.
Wow, what a team.
And Disney recently confirmed that there is going to be a sequel of The Devil Wears Prada, so we are going to talk about that at the end of the episode.
Yay, I'm so excited to get into it. But let's talk about the cast first. Let's talk about Anne Hathaway, who plays Andy.
We talked about her in our Princess Diaries episode, of course. That was one of our early episodes, right?
I think so. Maybe top 10.
First 10?
First 10, yeah.
In that episode, we specifically cover her relationship with a con man, which I didn't know about. Jenny told me the story of that relationship, and it's fascinating. And we also talked a lot about the, Hatha hate, quote unquote, that was happening in the world and, she has since come back from. We talk a lot about that phenomenon that seems to happen with women in Hollywood. So we love her. And if you guys want to hear more about that stuff, you can go listen to that episode.
Yeah, I think this is a good cherry on top to that episode. The director said that Anne had a really hard time during filming this movie. And he said, Annie was very emotional. She was living with a guy, her ex-boyfriend, Raffaello Folieri, who was a felon and embezzler. He didn't want her to be working at all. He hated that she worked nights. She was always fragile when we shot late. It's really sad.
It's really sad.
But very interesting after having heard her story. So if you guys want more information, definitely check out the Princess Diaries episode.
That's also the second quote that I read where somebody on the movie called her Annie. So I wonder if she goes by Annie in real life.
She does, actually. Everybody calls her Annie.
Wow.
I think it's kind of like Emma Stone going by Emily. Well, her name is Emily. I think everybody calls Anne Annie.
Wow. I totally didn't realize that. Cool. So this is understandable based on her previous relationship, but she keeps her personal life very private now. And she actually got married at age 29, which I think a lot of people at the time said, oh, that's very young, especially for Hollywood. But they've been married for 11 years, and she's still with him.
Oh, wow.
His name is Adam Schulman, and he's a jewelry designer.
Cool. I love that.
Their relationship seems very sweet. Like, there's not a lot about them online, but all of the photos of them and the quotes of them are, like, extremely supportive of the other person and, like, always just glowing, kind of talking about the other one.
Oh, we love that.
Mm-hmm. This is a quote that she gave about her relationship with Adam, and it references her meeting him shortly after her previous relationship that we talked about in the last episode. She said, quote, "I was just very honest with him. I knew from the second I met him that he was the love of my life. I also knew that I couldn't have met him at a worse time. I took my trust out for a ridiculous joyride with him. I told him, I believe because I need to believe that what just happened to me was the exception and not the rule, and that people are good, and you are a good person because I feel it. And so I am not in a good place right now, but I'm going with this. And he has never hurt me, and I was right. It was scary, but as the days wore on, it kept getting better and better. I found that the love I found for him made me more trusting of everyone, and the more I started to see who I had become, I had lost track of myself during those years, and I actually started to see who I had become, and that's when things got tricky and ugly, having to forgive myself."
That makes me so sad. That's such a heavy quote, but it's so great to hear her comeback from, a terrible relationship that she was in where she feels like she couldn't really trust people after that, and then she was able to find trust in him, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is kind of like a romance movie waiting to happen.
I know. And they have 2 sons together, Jonathan and Jack, who were born in 2016 and 2019. And yeah, they're just, I had never really heard of their relationship or anything, but it seems very sweet and supportive. And quotes from both of them just seem very, very nice. So that was encouraging to read.
I love that. That's great.
So speaking about Andy specifically in this movie, I read that Rachel McAdams was offered this role 3 times and turned it down repeatedly because she was taking a mental health break from Hollywood. So there was like a 2-year period, I think, that she just said, I'm not doing anything. And this was happening during that time. But apparently the studio execs were dead set on Rachel, even when they were negotiating with Anne. So they kept going back to her to like try to convince her to do it.
Wow. I could see Rachel McAdams in this role for sure. That's crazy though. Do you think this is her movie that got away? We always talk about this.
Maybe.
Or does Rachel not care because she's already super famous?
I don't know. And maybe she like really needed the mental health break. So maybe, I'm sure she doesn't regret that. But this is a big movie. So, and I could absolutely see her crushing it. And this would have been, a couple of years after The Notebook and Mean Girls. So this would have been like right on her trajectory.
Yeah. Honestly, respect for her, though, for understanding herself and needing to take a break and setting her boundaries, because I'm sure it would be hard to turn them down 3 times,
Yeah, like you're doing this big Meryl Streep movie that's like, yeah, that would be hard. I did, however, read a separate quote from the producer, Wendy Feinerman, and she said that she always wanted Anne Hathaway because, quote, she's a real all-American girl. So I don't know if this was like a battle between like the producer wanted Anne and the studio wanted Rachel or what, because I feel like those things are kind of conflicting, but interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I feel like that is what Anne was at the time, because she had just come off of Princess Diaries just a few years before, and that really launched her career. I could see all of that.
Yeah.
Some other actresses that were considered were Scarlett Johansson, Natalie Portman, and Kirsten Dunst, which I thought was interesting.
I feel like I could see all of them, actually.
I could, yeah. Kirsten Dunst was one that surprised me, but I was like, I could actually see her playing the kind of sweet, studious role really well. And then having the transformation, I think I could really see her. Before we move away from Anne, I do want to say that I think it's kind of poetic that we are ending our first year of the podcast with an Anne Hathaway movie. And that's because for any OGs who have listened since the beginning, I'm pretty sure in our very first episode ever, we made some joke that we were going to try to drop an Anne Hathaway reference into every episode. And I think we did try it for like an episode or 2. And then there was just no way that would continue.
She just happened to come up, I feel like, for at least a few episodes after that.
Yeah, she did. And so I just think it's great that you guys voted for this one and that we get to do an Anne Hathaway movie as our Podiversary episode.
I'm just realizing how much we have some favorites, like especially like female actresses that we just love that like come up repeatedly.
Yes.
And Anne is one of them.
She is. She definitely is.
Okay, should we talk about Meryl Streep, who plays Miranda?
Yes, let's do it. We have talked about her before in our Mamma Mia episode. Was there another one too, or no?
I think that was the main one. In the Mamma Mia episode, we talked a lot about Meryl's upbringing, where she went to college, and her marriage. So if you guys are interested in a little bit more on her personal life, make sure to go listen to that one. And this was interesting. I read that the producer, again, Wendy Feinerman, said that there was pushback to her casting originally. Now, we also said that the studio didn't greenlight the project until she was attached. So you can see there's some conflicting things out here, but it's such a long process to get a movie made that it just could have been at some point in the process. People were like giving her flack for it. Feinerman said, quote, Meryl, people thought we were crazy. I mean, I had people call me up and say, are you out of your mind? She's never been funny a day in her life.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
Imagine thinking Meryl Streep is the wrong choice for any role.
No, I know. It just would never happen today, I think.
No.
But I guess this was coming off the heels of some of her more dramatic projects. But this is a dramatic project to me, so...
Her role is not funny.
Like comedy, haha.
Yeah, in a traditional sense. It's more like the character is funny, you know?
Right.
Like the situations are funny.
Right. Anyway, Wendy Feinerman said that she was excited to cast her because she felt like it was an unexpected role and people weren't going to expect to see her in this sort of like buttoned up, harsh, funny character.
Interesting.
Obviously, Feinerman ended up being right because Meryl ended up winning a Golden Globe for her performance and was nominated for an Oscar. And everybody loved it, obviously.
And still, to this day, everybody loves it. Meryl said that to make her character more convincing for this movie, she distanced herself from the cast, and she would sit in her trailer while they were all laughing together. And she said it was horrible, and it's the last time she ever attempted method acting.
I don't blame her. That sounds rough.
I get what she was trying to do. I get that she wanted to, like, be intimidating and for it to be, like, genuine. But yeah, that sucks. She did say to Anne on the first day of filming, I think you're perfect for the role. I'm so happy we're going to be working together. And then she paused and followed it up with, that's the last nice thing I'll say to you.
Oh, that's funny.
But I love her. She was great in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Emily Blunt, who plays Emily.
You guys know Emily Blunt. She's in The Fall Guy, which is a recent movie that came out in theaters. Would highly recommend. I thought it was so funny.
It was so good.
A Quiet Place, Mary Poppins, The Girl on the Train, Dan in Real Life, and so many more. We love her. And she is married to John Krasinski, and they have 2 daughters, Violet and Hazel. And I've seen her on a couple late night shows where she like has really funny interviews where she's talking about her family and her kids' accents, like words that they'll say with an English accent and words that they say with an American accent. And I just think that's cute.
Oh, that's funny.
So her and John started dating in 2008 and then got married in 2010. So another long-standing Hollywood couple, which we love to see. However, I feel like in like tabloid rumor mill land, I'm always hearing that they have issues, like relationship issues. I have never seen that from them. I just feel like that is what's out in the gossip sphere. So I don't know if any of that's true.
How often do you feel like the gossip stuff is true? Because you're kind of more into that than I am.
It depends so much, I think, where you get it from.
Yeah, because I'm curious. Like, I could see that being the case, but also I could see people starting gossip about them because there is no gossip to have.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I could see either one. I mean, also, like, is there any couple in Hollywood that has never had issues? You know, like...
Or in the world.
Or in the world, yeah.
Yeah, and John Krasinski, to me, I don't know if you feel the same way, but he is so Jim from The Office to me, that to me, they are my Jim and Pam. I'm like, oh yeah, they're perfect.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel that way, which maybe just makes rumors about them more, like, exciting and clickbaity.
Delicious,
you know?
yeah.
Right. Anyway, something very fun that I love is that Stanley Tucci, who plays Nigel, we're going to talk about him in a second, is actually Emily Blunt's brother-in-law because he's married to her sister Felicity.
Incredible. Apparently they met at Emily Blunt's wedding to John Krasinski.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's really cute. Oh, so Devil Wears Prada maybe was responsible.
Emily Blunt said it was the reason.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's why he was invited, I suppose.
Oh, that's cute. I love that. I also love Stanley Tucci. Emily Blunt and Anne Hathaway also did one of those Actors on Actors videos where they talked about Devil Wears Prada. And Emily Blunt said, quote, I was so green coming into that situation, and you were like the warmest embrace. Even though you were a colossal movie star at the time, you treated me like a complete equal. You're one of the people I've known the longest. We've known each other for 18 years. We just had a joy bomb of a time on that movie. I don't know if any of us knew it was going to become what it did. It's quoted to me every week. It will be the movie that changed my life.
I didn't know that. That's really cute.
Mm-hmm.
That's great that she feels that way about this movie, too. I love when an actor is like, this was such a good experience, and it changed my entire trajectory, and I'll always be grateful for that.
Totally.
It makes me happy. It's not like the Robert Pattinson with Twilight, you know, like being just so grossly embarrassed by it.
Definitely different, yeah.
I thought this was so funny, just given what the movie is. Emily said that she and Meryl were wearing Uggs in most of the shots that are from the waist up because they didn't want to be in uncomfortable heels. So I'm just picturing all of those scenes where they're like so fashionable and then they're wearing Uggs.
Yeah. I love that.
But she said that Anne Hathaway wasn't so lucky to get away from the heels. And she said, Annie was running over cobblestone streets like a sure-footed little mountain goat. And that kind of sounds like something her character would say in this movie.
Yeah, it does. That's so funny.
And then we have Stanley Tucci, who we just talked about, but let's dive in.
You guys know him from The Hunger Games, the show Citadel, Spotlight, Easy A, The Lovely Bones, and a million other things. I love him. He is maybe one of my present-day celebrity crushes.
Really, him as Caesar Flickerman, he's always like one of my favorites in The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
He really brings so much comedy to a movie. Like, this movie would not be funny without him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's perfect for it. I love his TikTok also, by the way. If you guys don't follow him on TikTok, please do. His wife is the one that films all the videos, and she'll like direct him in the video so you can hear her talking. It's really funny. And it's mostly him cooking different Italian things because he's Italian.
That's so cute.
It's very endearing.
That's adorable.
There is some construction happening outside my window, so if it's a little bit loud, apologies.
Yeah, sorry. We had no other time. We had to do it now.
Yeah. So I didn't know this, but he started his career in theater and was on Broadway before he transitioned over to movies. And then he was married previously to his wife named Kate Tucci for a long time, and they had 3 kids. So he has 3 kids, but Kate passed away in 2009.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I believe it was cancer. And he always speaks very highly of her and that relationship and his children and everything.
Oh, that makes me so sad for him.
Now, obviously, like we said, he's married to Felicity Blunt, and they got married in 2012. He gave this quote about their relationship. I was afraid to get into a relationship, and I kept trying to break it off. He said, I'm 21 years older than she is, and I didn't want to feel old for the rest of my life. But I knew that this was an incredibly special person. Felicity has been so incredible taking on a widower and 3 children whose mother died. That's a huge thing, at a very young age, too. If anybody made things better for all of us, it's her. She's the one.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
I think we knock celebrity relationships that have huge age differences a lot of the time, but it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, it makes me like squeamish a little bit whenever anybody mentions an age gap that big, but I mean, it sounds like they're really happy, and seeing them like together on TikTok has just endeared me to them so much that it's hard for me to be upset. And, you know, for him to say that she came in and really like turned his and his kids' world around after their mom died, I feel like it's a really special thing. So
Definitely.
So John Leguizamo, I don't know if that's how you say his name. You guys will probably recognize him because I didn't know his name, but I recognized him. If you search him, he was originally offered the part of Nigel and he turned it down. And he did say that this is one of the ones he really regrets. And I can see why they would have pulled him for it. Because if you look him up, again, you guys will know him. He like plays a comedic character a lot. But I just think Stanley Tucci is perfect. So I'm glad they went with him.
I'm looking him up right now because I don't know him. Oh, yeah, I've definitely seen him in a ton of things. What has he been in before? Yeah, okay, I could see it for sure. Oh my gosh, is he Diego in Ice Age?
Oh, maybe.
No, he's Sid.
Oh, Sid.
Diego was one of my first crushes.
The tiger?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see it. I could see that.
Okay, Sid from Ice Age. I could see him playing a comedic, like Nigel character, but like you said, Stanley Tucci is just the best for this role. And Stanley apparently was cast only 72 hours before filming because they were really having a hard time casting him.
Wow. That's so last minute. Crazy.
I know. That always impresses me, I think, when they just have the right person at the right time.
Stanley has also said that he would return if they ever did a sequel. You know how they always ask that in interviews. He said he would be in, so we will see.
Okay, amazing. Hope so.
Okay, should we get into the movie?
Let's do it. So we open on Andrea, Andy, Sachs, played by Anne Hathaway, wiping away the steam on her bathroom mirror and brushing her teeth. And then we see the New York City skyline, and we get all of these cuts of different girls getting ready in New York, and they're all very fashionable. But then we keep cutting to Andy making the opposite choices of these girls. So she's wearing chapstick instead of lipstick, or she's choosing just normal white cotton underwear instead of something lacy. And then Andy kisses her boyfriend Nate goodbye and leaves for her job interview at Runway magazine.
I saw something recently on social media that was like, growing up, I always thought I would be these fashion girls getting ready in the morning, but I'm definitely the Anne Hathaway.
As I literally just put on regular chapstick before recording with you.
I'm eating my bagel. Yeah. When Andy gets to Runway magazine's office, Emily, played by Emily Blunt, says that human resources has an odd sense of humor, and she tells Andy that she was Miranda's second assistant, but her first assistant just got promoted, so now she's the first. And Andy says, "Oh, you're replacing yourself." And Emily says she's trying, but Miranda fired the last 2 girls after only a few weeks, and she needs to find someone who can survive here. And Andy says, "Who's Miranda?" But I'm like, any amount of research before you go to a job interview, I don't know. Feels like something that this character would have done.
Andy definitely would have at least looked up who her potential boss would be.
For sure. But it is funny.
Emily says, "I'll pretend you didn't just ask me that," and tells Andy that Miranda is the editor-in-chief at Runway, and if you work a year for her, you'll get hired at any magazine. It's a job millions of girls want. Andy says she'd love to be considered, and Emily tells her in a patronizing tone that this is a fashion magazine, so an interest in fashion is crucial. Andy says, "What makes you think I'm not interested in fashion?" And she gets like a once-over from Emily. It's so funny.
Then Emily's phone goes off and she screams no, and she tells everyone she's on her way. She, meaning Miranda, we know that. Then Runway's art director, Nigel, played by Stanley Tucci, says, "All right, everyone, gird your loins." This was like one of the most iconic lines to me.
I think it was improv.
Really? Oh,
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. And then he also says, "Did someone eat an onion bagel?" and turns his nose up at Andy.
And she like checks her breath. It's so funny.
Mm.
The office is in absolute chaos as everyone prepares for Miranda's arrival. We see her step out of the car and start walking into the office, but we don't see her face. And then we see her as she steps out of the elevator, and she is just fabulous.
Miranda comes into the office and immediately starts barking a long list of orders to Emily, who's trying to keep up. This is so impressive to me when the girls can like pay attention to like all of the different things that she's saying.
Agree.
Then when Miranda passes Andy, she asks who she is, and Emily says she's the next girl that HR sent, but she's pre-interviewed her for Miranda, and Andy is hopeless. Miranda says she wants to see for herself because everyone Emily has sent her has been completely inadequate. So Emily sends Andy in to see Miranda, but takes her briefcase. Because as she's walking in, she like snatches the briefcase out of Andy's hands and says, "This is foul, don't let her see it."
Andy tells Miranda that she just graduated from Northwestern but is having a hard time finding a journalism job. Miranda says, "So you don't read Runway? And before today, you had never heard of me? And you have no style or sense of fashion?" And while she's saying this, Andy is kind of saying no to everything that she's saying. But then to the "you have no style or sense of fashion" comment, Andy says, "That depends on," and Miranda says, "That wasn't a question." She cuts Andy off and tells her, "That's all," which is kind of her iconic quote. And Andy starts to leave, but then she turns around and says, "Okay, you're right. I don't fit in here. I'm not glamorous or skinny, and I don't know much about fashion. But I'm smart, I learn fast, and I will work very hard." And this is the first moment where I'm like, "Anne, you're trying to convince me that you are not skinny?"
Mm-hmm.
Confusing. Then Nigel interrupts to talk to Miranda about work, and as Andy leaves, he says, "Who is that sad little person? Are we doing a before and after piece I don't know about?" And before Andy leaves the building, Emily follows her and calls her back.
That night, Andy and her friends, Lily and Doug, go to the restaurant that her boyfriend Nate works at, and they all sit at a table and talk about Andy's new job. Everyone knows who Miranda is except for her.
Andy and Nate walk home, and she tells him she doesn't have anything to wear to work. He asks if she needs a ball gown to get coffee and answer phones, and she tells him he should see how the girls who work there dress.
The next morning, Andy's phone rings at 6:15 a.m. and wakes her up, and it's Emily telling her she needs to get to the office immediately with Miranda's coffee order. As Andy's like on her way that morning, Emily keeps calling her to see what's taking so long, and then we see in the office, Miranda asks why her coffee isn't there, and asks, has she died or something? And then Andy comes in with the coffee, and Emily tells her if she messes up, it's Emily's head that's on the chopping block.
Emily tells Andy that they need to answer every phone call, and says that their jobs are different because Andy gets coffee and Emily handles Miranda's schedule, and most importantly, gets to go to Paris Fashion Week with Miranda.
Then Emily shows Andy the book, which is the mock-up of everything in the current runway issue that gets taken to Miranda's house for review. Emily says that Miranda doesn't trust Andy yet to take the book to her house, so that's Emily's job for now. Then she goes to drop the book off at the art department, and while Emily is gone, Andy answers the phone, and she says, "Can I take a message? I'm sorry, can you spell Gabbana?" And they hang up on her, so it's not going well.
No, not at all. Nigel hands Andy a pair of heels and says, "I guessed 8.5. Andy says she doesn't need them because Miranda hired her and knows what she looks like. Then Miranda calls for Emily, and Nigel says, "She means you."
Maybe this is what bothers me so much about, like, the undertone of, because it's not even the weight. It's like Andy, we see Andy as this, like, very smart, seemingly pretty self-confident person at the beginning, and then she gets ripped down and then built back up into this, like, quote, prettier version. Do you know what I mean?
It's kind of like in The Princess Diaries when Anne Hathaway also gets a makeover in that movie.
And then suddenly everybody wants to be her friend and likes her because has straight hair.
Exactly. And in this movie, her hair is just like maybe a little bit less straight.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets like, it's all smooth and stuff. And I don't know. It is interesting.
Yeah. So then Miranda gives Andy a ton of things to do and tells her to bore someone else with her questions because Andy starts like asking follow-ups when Miranda tells her what to do. And then Miranda says, "Oh, and Emily," and then looks at Andy's shoes and says, "That's all."
Andy runs back to her desk and puts on the heels very frantically. Miranda calls to Andy to ask if she has the person on the phone like she asked, and Andy frantically tries to figure out what to do, but Emily steps in and handles it. Emily sends Andy on a bunch of errands for Miranda after that.
Then it's time for the run-through, where editors bring in clothes options for Miranda to choose for the shoot, and Miranda isn't pleased with anyone's work. The accessories editor Jocelyn holds up 2 nearly identical belts for Miranda to choose from. You guys will remember the scene, it's iconic. And Jocelyn says, "Tough call. They both look so different." And this makes Andy laugh, like snort in the corner. And Miranda says, "Is something funny?" And Andy says that both belts look exactly the same to her, and she's still learning about all this stuff. And then Miranda has her iconic cerulean sweater monologue, where she says, "This stuff? Oh, okay, I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back. But what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. You're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns, and then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. Then it filtered down through the department stores, and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you, no doubt, fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars of countless jobs, and it's sort of comical how you think you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when, in fact, you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff."
Bravo.
Thank you.
That night, Andy rants to Nate about work, and she decides she has to stick it out for a year so that she can actually get the jobs that she wants in journalism, but she's not going to let Miranda get to her. He makes her a late-night grilled cheese, but she doesn't eat it, because everyone at work is obsessed with weight.
I'm not gonna lie, I have always wanted to make a grilled cheese with this type of cheese, ever since I saw this movie for the first time.
What type of cheese is it?
I think it's Jarlsberg, because I think later in the movie she like tries to throw it away and he's like, "There's like $8 worth of Jarlsberg in that," or something.
Yeah, you're right.
And ever since that I was like, oh, the chef is making this fancy grilled cheese, I want to try it.
Have you ever watched Binging with Babish on YouTube? He makes videos where he recreates food from famous movies. He probably has done The Devil Wears Prada, I'm not sure.
Oh, I need to find it. I would love that. I love cooking videos, so this is right up my alley.
Or we should make our own and we should try it. That would be fun.
Would love that. Then we see a montage of Miranda throwing her coats and bags on the desk each day and barking orders at Andy, and then Andy running errands for her. At the end of the montage, we see Andy handling a phone call like Emily would. She learned a lot, you can tell. And she tries to make small talk with Emily, but Emily does not engage. You can tell Emily kind of thinks she's above her still.
Then Andy's dad is in town and they go out to dinner. He gives her money for rent, and he tells her that he and her mom are really worried about her. They get emails from her office at 2 a.m., her pay is terrible, and she doesn't get to actually write anything. We find out that she turned down her acceptance to Stanford Law to be a journalist. Andy tries to explain that Emily is going to get to meet tons of editors and writers in Paris, and in a year, that could be her. She says this is her break, and then her phone rings, and Miranda calls that her flight was canceled due to the weather, and she has to get home for her twins' recital. We see Andy desperately trying to get a flight over the phone while she and her dad rush through Times Square, but no planes are flying out because there's a hurricane.
You repeating the scene just made me realize that this is probably the first movie we've talked about that has an accurate or a more accurate representation of like an entry-level person working at a magazine in New York City.
Yes.
Where she's just like broke and working all the time compared to the How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, 13 Going on 30.
The Andy Anderson. We're talking about Andy Sachs.
Like all the it girls that were like writers at magazines in New York, and they're 22 and they're like editors and they live in huge apartments, you know? This is not that, which I appreciate.
I do appreciate that too, because those movies gave us such unrealistic expectations of our futures.
Yeah. At work, Miranda says the girls' recital was wonderful and everyone loved it, except for her because she wasn't there. She asks if Andy knows why she hired her, and she says she always hired the same girls, stylish ones who were obsessed with the magazine, and they were always disappointing and stupid. She says she thought Andy would be different, and she took a chance on the, quote, smart fat girl. She says Andy disappointed her more than any of the other silly girls. Then Andy cries and tries to apologize, but Miranda says, that's all. Very cold.
Very cold. Also, calling her fat,
I will never understand, okay? I think she makes a comment about being a size 6. And this whole movie, they're calling her fat. I will never understand. And I guess, as I'm saying this, knowing that Miranda Priestley is based on a real person, and like the book was written by the person who was Andy, I could see maybe them wanting to include it because it is harsh. So I guess maybe we're overlooking that piece of like, we're having the reaction of like, oh my God, that's so harsh and mean. They shouldn't be saying it. But if the truth is that they were saying it and the expectation was that if you work at a big fashion magazine in New York, you be a size 0, and that feels unfair and realistic and harsh, then like they should include it so that we can have that reaction to it.
Yeah.
I think maybe my issue more so was like, nobody then was like, no, you're not. Or she even really, after the first time, wasn't like, no, I'm not. And so there was no like redemption of that story. It just became, oh, I guess you're right. I will, like, you know, just over time, what happens is she ends up changing and she does lose weight. And then she brags about being a size 4 at the end of the movie. And I think that journey is what's disappointing.
It is, because it's like, what message does that send to girls?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me sad that like I watched this in high school and like totally just must have internalized it because I thought this was an awesome movie. Never thought about it, you know?
But I do think you're right. I think it was probably accurate to what it was like. And if you work in the fashion industry, you probably, especially in the 2000s, had different expectations on you.
Mm-hmm. Which is unfair. And I think it's good to shine a light on that, especially, again, given this was based on a novel, which was based on someone's real experience. But I just didn't like how much room it took up in the movie, you know?
Yeah, it was kind of like the joke the whole time.
Yeah.
So then after this conversation with Miranda, Andy goes to Nigel for help, and he tells her to quit if she's so miserable, but she says she doesn't want to quit. She just wants credit for trying. And he says, be serious. You're not trying, you're whining. He says, this is not just a magazine. It's a shining beacon of hope to, oh, I don't know, say a young boy growing up in Rhode Island with 6 brothers, pretending to go to soccer practice when he was actually at a sewing class and reading Runway at night under the covers with a flashlight. He tells her that so many people would die to work here while she wonders why Miranda won't give her a gold star. And then Andy gets an idea and says, Nigel. And he says no, because he realizes what she's asking.
But then we cut to Runway's closet and he pulls all these designer clothes for her and then takes her to the beauty department.
Back at the office, Emily and another girl who works at the office named Serena make fun of Andy. Emily says she knew from the moment she saw Andy that she'd be a complete and utter disaster. But then Andy walks in the office and Emily is completely stunned because Andy looks very stylish and has her hair and makeup done. Serena tells her that she looks good and Emily tells her to shut up.
I will say, regardless of everything I just said, I love a makeover scene.
I know. There's something so satisfying about a 2000s makeover scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even want to talk about what it maybe did to us as girls.
Because I still want that, which I think is why I love it. But that's also probably not great that it made me want that. But I do. I want somebody to be like, let me pick all these clothes for you and redo your hair and everything, you know?
It's fun. It's girlhood.
Fun. Yeah. Or it also reminds me of like makeover birthday parties when you go to like Libby Lou or something and they would like do your makeup and put sparkles in your hair.
It's fun. It's just fun.
Definitely rooted in misogyny in the case of the movies. However, sue me. I love it.
We can have complex, nuanced discussions about the things that we grew up with and that we love because we grew up with them, you know?
Yeah, this is going to be the thing. I feel like when we're watching movies, when we're older and we have kids, they were like, oh my God, a makeover. And it's going to age us because like our kids are going to be like, Mom, that is so old fashioned. They don't need a makeover to do blah, 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 you know?
Exactly. Like her hair was fine the way it was.
Which fair, but I still want a makeover.
And I'll be very proud of that day when it happens.
Sure.
I'll be very happy.
Of course. Okay, so back to the movie. When Nate gets off work that night, Andy's leaning against a car waiting for him, and he walks past without recognizing her at first. And I think they have like some like cute flirty conversation where he definitely doesn't like realize that it's Andy because she has bangs, I guess. I don't know.
Did you think that he didn't recognize her?
I don't think he did for a second.
I don't know. I thought it was like joking.
Oh, you think?
But maybe. I don't know. That's funny though.
And then we see a montage of Andy going into work in all of these different, very fashionable outfits. And we see that she has Miranda's office set up exactly how she wants it. And we can tell that Miranda is surprised and pleased for once, especially by Andy's transformation. Though, of course, she doesn't actually say anything like directly praising Andy.
Then Andy meets Nate and her friends after work and apologizes for being late. And she brings them very expensive products from work as gifts. Lily gets really excited that she brought her the new Marc Jacobs bag that sold out everywhere that Miranda didn't want. And Lily immediately starts stuffing it with stuff.
Yeah.
Then Nate says he doesn't understand why women need so many bags. Andy says there's more to Runway than purses, and Nate says it sounds like she started drinking the Kool-Aid. Then her phone rings, and her friends pretend to answer it and throw her phone to each other, which would just give me so much anxiety.
Same.
It's a bad friend move, to be honest. And Andy eventually snatches the phone from them and answers it and tells her friends they didn't have to be such assholes and leaves.
What do you think of Andy and Nate's relationship?
I was going to ask you the same question. I personally maybe relate to Nate a little bit. Like, I feel like he's just a very grounded character, and I didn't get any red flags from him. So I was like, oh, I feel like they're such a good relationship, and I like want them to end up together, and he's going to help her stay true to who she is. However, upon reading internet discourse, he is considered the villain of the movie by a lot of people.
This is how I feel.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I need you to indoctrinate me into the Nate hate club.
I just think he's not supportive ever. Like the whole entire time.
That's
he's
true.
super unsupportive of the whole thing. And I just feel like if that was actually your long-term, years-long partner that you lived with and you got this cool job, like he's hating on it from her very first day at work. And that sucks. And I can absolutely understand the frustration and the arguments and the eventual breakup that happens when she changes everything about herself and stops prioritizing her personal life because, of course, that makes sense. But it just feels like there's never any empathy or support of like, no, I understand. You know, like I've had a partner that has a really time-consuming, taxing job.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes you just have to buy in as that person's partner, you know, and be like, I get that this sucks. It sucks for you too. Like she's, you know, Andy's the one that's working all the time. And he's just whiny to me.
And at the end of the day, you know that it's short term so that they can reach their next
dreams.
goal.
Yeah. Like it's not a job she ever wanted. Again, I totally understand when she starts changing and like acting like a different person. Makes sense. But in general, it just made me feel sad for her.
Yeah. In a little bit of defense of Nate, I do think that they both used to make fun of fashion and this kind of thing together. So yes. I think he's just continuing that, thinking that she still feels the same way.
That's fair.
Because at the beginning, too, she is ranting to him about how dumb everybody at work is and how they care about stupid stuff like the belt situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I don't think he was supportive of her when he needed to be. And that makes him toxic, so maybe I am in the Nate hate club.
I would love to know what you guys think. Let me know. So then Andy shows up at a top designer James Holt's fancy party in his loft, and she introduces herself to him after having some different partygoers point him out, and he says that she must be the new Emily. And he compliments her bag and asks who made it, and she says, you. And then he gives her a folio and says it has a sketch of Miranda's dress for the benefit, which is the top secret centerpiece of his spring collection. She says she'll guard it with her life.
Then she gets a drink upon James Holt's suggestion and meets a cute guy who tells her to be careful with the punch because last time he had it, he woke up in Hoboken wearing nothing but a poncho and a cowboy hat. He introduces himself as Christian Thompson, and she fangirls over him and says that he writes for every magazine that she loves. She says she's a writer too, and he asks if she'll send some of her work over to him. She says, well, right now she's actually not writing, she's Miranda Priestley's assistant, and he says she'll never survive Miranda because she's nice and smart. She says she's gotta go, and he says, very nice to meet you, Miranda girl. And I immediately disliked him.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Because he puts her down almost immediately, like, oh, you're too sweet, you'll never survive.
Mm.
And I think there's like this flirty banter back and forth with them kind of throughout the whole movie that could be just, I don't know, chalked up to them flirting with each other. But I think he's kind of offensive in like many situations. Like he puts her down a little bit. I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah, no, I could see that. He comes off like a total fuckboy, I feel like.
Yeah, he's very cocky.
Wow. Then we're at James Holt's collection preview, and Nigel tells Andy Miranda's code. If she gives 1 nod, it's good. 2 is very good, and there's only been 1 actual smile on record. If she doesn't like it, she shakes her head, and then of course, there's the pursing of the lips. Andy's voiceover says, which means, and then we see Miranda look at her dress for the benefit, the centerpiece of Holt's collection, and she purses her lips. And then Nigel's voiceover says, catastrophe. Afterward, Andy asks, because she pursed her lips, he's going to change his entire collection? And Nigel says, you still don't get it, do you? Her opinion is the only one that matters.
While Miranda gets in the car, she tells Andy to call her husband and confirm dinner. And Andy says that she already did. Then Miranda says she'll also need a change of clothes, and Andy says she already sent her outfit over to the shoot. Miranda is surprised, and she finally calls Andy by her name, not Emily, but she calls her Andrea.
Fancy.
Fancy Andrea. And then she says she wants Andy to be the one to deliver the book to her house tonight.
Andy is obviously excited that she must have done something right to have the privilege to take the book to Miranda's house. And you can tell Emily isn't thrilled by this. Like, I think she likes having all the power of being Miranda's favorite. But then she tells her everything she needs to know about her new task, which has very particular steps and is top secret. And most importantly, Andy is not supposed to talk to anyone when she's at Miranda's.
Then we see Andy actually dropping the book off, and she's struggling to find the exact place where she needs to put the book. Then Miranda's twins call from the staircase and tell her which door to go through. And then they convince her to come bring the book up to them because Emily does it all the time, is what they say. So Andy falls for this, and she does go up to the twins, and she accidentally walks in on Miranda and her husband, getting in an argument about him waiting on her at the restaurant. When Miranda sees that Andy has walked in on them, she is absolutely livid, and Andy just drops the book off on the floor at the top of the stairs and leaves.
The next day, Andy explains what happened, and Emily freaks out that she went upstairs, and she says, why didn't you just climb into bed with her and ask for a bedtime story? Emily says Miranda isn't happy, and if Andy gets fired, that might jeopardize Paris for her.
Miranda calls Andy into her office, and Andy starts to apologize, but then Miranda says, I need the new Harry Potter book for the twins. It's the unpublished one because they want to know what happens next. And Andy is like, that's impossible. But Miranda goes, you can do anything, right? And the book better be there no later than 3 p.m., which is only 4 hours from now. She's really mad that Andy walked in on her and basically just wants to set her up for failure.
Exactly, yeah. She's going to have a reason to fire her if she fails. Andy panics, obviously, and we see her running through the streets making calls. And then she sees a bus that has Christian Thompson's name on it and gets an idea. She calls Christian and asks him about getting the Harry Potter manuscript for Miranda, and he says it's impossible, and she says she's desperate and there's no plan B.
Andy calls Nate and tells him she quit so she can beat Miranda to the punch, since she was just going to be fired anyway for not being able to get the book. But then she gets a call from Christian, and he says, I'm brilliant, and tells her that a friend of a friend does the cover art and has the manuscript.
Andy runs to meet Christian at the St. Regis and gets the manuscript. And then we cut to her at the office, and she plops the manuscript on Miranda's desk, and Miranda says, 1 copy. What are my twins going to do with that? Share? And Andy says, no, I made 2 copies and had them covered, reset, and bound so that they wouldn't look like manuscripts. This is an extra copy to have on file, just in case. Miranda asks where these copies are, and Andy says that they're with the twins, and we cut to the twins reading the Harry Potter book 7 manuscripts on the train on their way to Grandma's. And you can tell Miranda is surprised and very impressed because this was supposed to be the impossible task. And Andy asks if there's anything more she can do for her, and Miranda says, that's all. But it's like a very stunned, that's all.
It's very satisfying, this whole scene. Then Andy is back at home, and she's painting a science project for the twins. And Nate comes in, suggesting that they celebrate that she quit her job. And then he realizes that she's working on the twins' science project, and she says it doesn't make sense throwing away all of those months of hard work. She says she's still the same person she was and wants the same things. She just has better clothes. And he says, I like the old clothes. But then she shows off her new bra, and he changes his mind because he's a man.
Yeah. I was watching this with my younger sister, Emma, and she was like, oh, so he's not supportive of her job until she gets naked?
That is actually a theme, I feel like, throughout the whole thing. Is like, he'll give her shit for something, and then he'll be like, but you look pretty, though. And it's like, okay.
Okay.
As we talk about it, it's like marinating a little bit more.
At a photo shoot the next day, Andy gets sassy with Nigel, and he asks her to adjust her attitude, and she apologizes and says her personal life is hanging by a thread. He says that's what happens when you're doing well at work, and says to let him know when her whole life goes up in smoke because that means it's time for a promotion.
In a meeting, Miranda asks about accessories, and Jocelyn says they're showing a lot of florals right now. And then Miranda says another iconic line, florals for spring, groundbreaking.
Emily is very sick and coughing, and she doesn't want to miss the benefit that night because she's been waiting for it and she'll be wearing Valentino. She tells Andy that she can leave, and Andy is excited to go home early because it's Nate's birthday. But then as Andy's leaving, her phone rings. Miranda wants Andy to come and help Emily at the benefit since Emily is sick. And so then Andy has to memorize these binders of people and who they are so that they can tell Miranda who everyone is at the benefit. It's a lot of work.
Then Andy walks the red carpet at the benefit and gets her photo taken. Emily tells her she looks so chic, which I feel like is the first time Emily compliments her.
I think so.
Andy fidgets at the benefit because she's super late for Nate's birthday and she's getting really nervous. But then she notices Jacqueline Follet, someone from French Runway that Miranda hates. Jacqueline and Miranda exchange their pleasantries, but you can tell that Miranda doesn't like her. And then Emily struggles to remember someone that Miranda needs to say hi to, and Andy steps in to save the day and tell Miranda his name, and Emily whispers thank you to her.
I feel like this is when they become friends.
Yes, and this is where the power dynamic flips.
Yep.
And you can tell that, Emily is kind of number 2 now.
As Andy's leaving, she runs into Christian outside the benefit, and he tells her that she's a vision and that if it wasn't for her stupid boyfriend, he'd whisk her away right now. She excuses herself, but then he tells her that his editor for New York Magazine is inside, and he could make an introduction. She starts to say that she could stay for one drink, but then, realizes how late it is and says that she can't and that she has to go.
Props to her, honestly. I'm used to characters in movies like this making the wrong decision, and I don't really feel like she does this whole movie. I think she really does try her best to do right by everybody and do her job.
Yeah, she's trying. Although there's part of me that's like, you missed the birthday party. Go meet the editor. That's why you're doing this job, You're
like, just screw Nate entirely.
I mean, by the time she got home, it looked like, midnight? So it's like, the whole reason that you're doing this difficult job is to be able to meet the editors and, go to these events. So why don't you just, whatever.
So she gets home with a cupcake and a lit birthday candle. Nate is on the couch, and he's just watching TV, and he looks very upset. She apologizes to him and tells him she kept trying to leave the benefit earlier, but she couldn't. He tells her not to worry about it and says he's going to bed. She asks if they can at least talk about it, but he just looks at her sadly and says, "You look really pretty," and goes to bed. And then she blows out his birthday candle.
Again, it's just like, you did this shitty thing, but at least you look pretty. I just think that's the undercurrent of all of it. It's like Emily at the benefit, she's so sick, but she's talking about how she needs one more stomach flu to be skinny enough to go to Paris or whatever.
Yes.
It's well, I'm going through this, but at least I'm skinny, but at least I'm pretty, at least I look good. It's ugh.
Yeah, my girlfriend can't show up to my birthday, but hey, she looks nice.
Yeah. Then we see Andy go to Miranda's house, and she expertly drops off the book for Miranda, and you can tell she is in a whole routine now. She knows what she's doing. And then before she leaves, Miranda calls her in the other room and asks her to hand her the book in person. And she tells Andy that Paris Fashion Week is the most important week of the year, and she needs the best possible team with her. She says that no longer includes Emily. Andy realizes that she means that she wants her to go instead of Emily, and Andy says that Emily would die and she can't do that to her. But Miranda says if she doesn't go, she'll assume Andy isn't serious about her future at Runway or any other publication.
Woof.
Very blackmail-y.
Yes. So Andy walks home and she's miserable about this decision, and she stays up really late going through old photos and thinking. And at the office the next day, Andy reaches for Miranda's coat and purse, but Miranda dumps them on Emily's empty desk instead. Then she tells her to tell Emily about Paris Fashion Week right now. So Andy calls Emily, who apologizes for being late because she's running an errand for Miranda. Emily crosses the street while talking to Andy and gets hit by a taxi? That was wild.
Dark turn.
What is it with 2000s movies loving the get hit by a bus or taxi?
Hit by a car, I know. And then we cut to Emily in her hospital room, and she tells Andy that she doesn't care if Miranda was going to fire her or beat her. She should have said no. Andy says she didn't have a choice. And Emily says what really gets her is that Andy doesn't care about all of this stuff. She says, face it, Andy, you sold your soul the day you put on that first pair of Jimmy Choos. And you know what really kills me? The clothes you're about to get. You don't deserve them. You eat carbs, for Christ's sake.
Then Andy is at her friend Lily's gallery show, and she's staring at a painting when she hears, "Hey, Miranda girl." And it's Christian. He asks if she'll be going to Paris, and she says yes. He then tells her he'll be staying across from a falafel restaurant that will change her life, and she says she's sorry, but she'll be too busy working, and he'll have to find someone else's life to change. He says he's starting to wonder if he can, and then kisses her on the cheek. And Lily, from kind of far away, sees him kiss her on the cheek, and she sees Andy's reaction to it as he leaves, and her mouth drops open. Andy then meets Lily's eyes and chases after her, telling her that it's just a guy from work. And Lily says, "The Andy I know is madly in love with Nate." She says that she's known everything about that Andy for 16 years, and that she doesn't understand this Andy. She tells her to have fun in Paris and just kind of marches away.
And then Nate appears. And he says, "You're going to Paris?" And then he, very innocently, says that he thought that was a big deal for Emily. And Andy says, "You're going to give me a hard time too?" and runs out of the gallery. Nate chases her out, and she says that she didn't have a choice. And he says that's what she always says now, like she doesn't make any of these decisions herself. She says she knows he hates Runway and Miranda and thinks fashion is stupid. And he says, "I make port wine reductions all day. I'm not exactly in the Peace Corps. I wouldn't care if you were out there pole dancing all night, as long as you did it with a little integrity." He says she used to make fun of the Runway girls, and now she's become one. And he says, that's fine, just own up to it, and we can stop pretending like we have anything in common anymore. Andy says maybe they should take a break. Nate looks sad and just walks away. And then just as she's calling him back, her phone starts ringing, and she says she has to take it. And he laughs and says he hopes she and Miranda are very happy together, because that's who she's really in a relationship with.
I'm gonna be honest, I was on his side in this situation.
I think in this argument, actually, yes, me too.
And then we're in Paris, and Miranda introduces Andy to designers as her new Emily. Christian comes up to Andy and says she still owes him for Harry Potter, but there is still the problem of the boyfriend. And based on Andy's face, he can tell that they broke up and asks when he should pick her up. She doesn't answer and gets back to work.
That night, Andy walks into Miranda's suite, assuming she's at dinner, but finds her on the couch with no makeup and a robe. She's obviously been crying and her face is kind of puffy. And this is when Andy finds out that Miranda's husband wants a divorce and will no longer be coming to Paris as planned. Miranda says she can just imagine what papers are going to write about her for getting another divorce. She says she doesn't care what they write about her, but it's unfair for the girls. And you can tell Andy is really affected by what Miranda is going through and seeing her like this because it's so unusual. And she asks if there's anything she can do, and Miranda just says, "Your job."
I found out that the no makeup was Meryl's idea. I do think it was such a great contrast to her in the rest of the movie, where it made this scene very heavy.
Yeah, it makes her vulnerable, and I think it sets them up, this and a couple of other scenes between the two of them, between now and the end of the movie, I think set them up to have this almost personal relationship outside of work. And so I liked it a lot.
At least as close as you can get to Miranda.
Yeah.
Then Andy touches up her mascara in the mirror, like the girls at the beginning of the movie, and she gets a flashback of her old self. Nigel shows up and asks for Miranda's itinerary for tomorrow, and he asks who put Andy's outfit together for her. She says it's just something she threw on, and he's very impressed and says his work here is done. He gets champagne to toast to getting the dream job that millions of girls wanted. Andy says, the job I got months ago, and Nigel says he's not talking about her. He says that James Holt, the designer, made him a partner in his new business venture. Miranda knows, and she put him up for it. He says he's so excited, and it's the first time in 18 years that he'll be able to call the shots in his own life. They toast to him, and she says he deserves it. He says, you bet your size 6 ass. And she says, 4. Just like we talked about earlier. Terrible.
Then Andy goes to dinner with Christian and says there are things Miranda does that she doesn't agree with, and Christian just tells her to just admit that she hates Miranda and is a sadist. And Andy says if Miranda was a man, no one would notice anything but how great she is at her job. And Christian says he can't believe that she's defending her and says playfully that she's crossing over to the dark side. Their whole interaction date is very flirty.
After dinner, she and Christian walk the Paris streets, and she grabs a lamppost and spins around it, saying that she never understood why people were so crazy about Paris, but now she realizes that it's so beautiful. And as she spins around, he kisses her. She tells him that she can't, she and Nate only just split up, and she's had too much wine. He keeps kissing her until she's out of excuses, and she ends up going home with him and waking up in his bed. And he's not there in the morning. Then she looks over at her watch and realizes that she's late for work. And as she grabs her things, she knocks over Christian's briefcase, and this mock-up of Runway magazine falls out. And he comes out from the shower, and she asks him about it. And he says it's a mock-up of what the new American runway will look like when Jacqueline Follet is editor-in-chief. He says they're replacing Miranda, and Jacqueline is bringing him in to run editorial content. Andy is shocked by this, and he asks why, because Jacqueline is younger and has a fresher take. Andy says Miranda will be devastated, and they can't do that to her. But he says it's a done deal, and she's going to be told at the party for James Holt. Andy hastily grabs her things, and he says, baby, it's done. And she says, I'm not your baby, and leaves.
Andy immediately calls Miranda on her way back to the hotel and tries to tell her, but Miranda hangs up. And then she bangs on Miranda's suite door, and Irv, the chairman, answers the door. And Miranda appears behind him, and Andy begs Miranda to talk to her, but Miranda says to not disturb her again and shuts the door in her face.
Andy then runs to the place where James Holt's party is, and she waits for Miranda to show up. And when she does, Andy spills everything to her about the plans to replace her. Miranda says, do I smell freesias? If I see freesias anywhere, I will be very disappointed.
At the party, Miranda goes up on stage and thanks everyone for coming to celebrate James Holt. She says first she wants to share some news with everyone. She starts to announce the new president of James's global brand, and Nigel gets very excited, obviously, because he thinks this is him. But then she says Jacqueline Follet, and Nigel is completely blindsided, and so is Christian. Nigel says to Andy, when the time is right, she'll pay me back. And Andy says, are you sure about that? And he says he isn't, but he has to hope for the best.
This made me so sad for him because you can tell that he's just kind of resigned to the fact that, even though he was just about to have so much freedom and such a jump in his career, he's just like, well, one day.
Mm-hmm. You can just tell he's very bought into the way this works, the whole fashion industry works.
Yeah.
It's sad.
The director told Stanley Tucci to act like he had been nominated for an Oscar and just heard another actor's name called, which I feel like he really did.
He did, yeah.
And Meryl Streep was standing nearby when he said this, and she said, oh, I can help with that. Which I love.
Tragic.
Andy and Miranda ride back together from the party, and Miranda says, you thought I didn't know. I've known what was happening for quite some time. She says it took her time to figure out a suitable alternative for Jacqueline. We find out she was telling the chairman that Jacqueline accepted the new position when Andy saw them together. We also find out that Miranda has a list of designers, photographers, editors, writers, and models who will follow her if she ever leaves Runway, and that made the chairman reconsider. She says she was very impressed by how intently Andy tried to warn her, and she sees a great deal of herself in Andy. Andy says she doesn't think she's like her, and couldn't do what Miranda did to Nigel. Miranda says, you already did, to Emily. And Andy said she didn't have a choice, which is kind of the thing she keeps saying throughout the whole movie. And Miranda says, no, you chose. You chose to get ahead. You want this life. Those choices are necessary. Andy says, what if I don't want to live the way you live? And Miranda says, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants to be us. She smiles and gets out of the car to reporters and photographers. And you can tell that Andy has this moment where she knows Miranda on a very personal level and how her personal life is just falling apart. And you just see her kind of realize this and that she has two paths to take. And she just turns and she walks in the opposite direction. And Miranda looks back over her shoulder and is shocked to see that Andy isn't behind her. And then Andy gets a call from Miranda and she chucks her phone in a fountain.
This is probably my favorite scene of the whole movie.
So great.
Just the whole thing of her saying, like, Miranda saying, you already did that to Emily. And Andy kind of realizing, I feel like I identify with this as a people pleaser of Andy saying, like, I didn't have a choice. Like, I had to say yes or I was going to lose my job. But Miranda being like, no, that is still a choice, which is what Nate has been saying to her the whole movie, too. Like, it feels like it isn't a choice to her, but everything is a choice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm not going to lie. I had this overwhelming feeling when I was watching the scene where I'm like, I would have got out the car and followed Miranda. I just know it.
Oh, I 100% would have. I would have been like, well, yes, I choose this life.
Yeah. Maybe that's just my codependence. Like, if Miranda says to me, like, everyone wants to be us, come on. Like, I'm taking you under my wing. I would be like, I'm in. I'm going with her. Like, I'm not going to disrupt this situation right now.
When I've worked this hard and lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a good character moment for sure.
So then we can assume there's maybe a little bit of a time jump, like maybe a couple weeks. And we see Andy meeting up with Nate at a restaurant, and she tells him that he was right about everything. She turned her back on her friends, family, and everything she believed in. And she apologizes. Nate tells her that he got a new job as a sous chef and is moving to Boston. And she congratulates him and says she doesn't know what she'll do without his late-night grilled cheeses. And he says, I'm pretty sure they have bread in Boston. He says they might be able to figure something out, and they both smile. And then she tells him that she has a job interview today.
Andy walks into an office for her interview at the New York Mirror, and it's not a fancy office. There's cubicles and people in normal suits. You can imagine that this is the place that she would have originally applied to and would have loved to work here. Her interviewer asks her why she was at Runway for less than a year. She says she learned a lot, but she screwed it up, which, like, you should never say in an interview.
No.
I was like, girl. He said that he called for a reference and then got a fax from Miranda Priestley herself saying that out of all of her assistants, Andy was by far the biggest disappointment. And then he says, and if I don't hire you, I am an idiot. He says she must have done something right.
Then we see Andy smiling on her way home from the job interview, and she passes by Runway's building and calls the office. Emily answers. Andy asks Emily for a favor, and she asks her if she'll take all of her Paris clothes off her hands. And we see Emily is so touched, but she plays it cool and says that it's a huge imposition, and she'll have to get them taken in, because they'll drown her. But she does end up saying that she'll take them. And then when they get off the phone, Emily snaps at the new assistant and tells her she has some very large shoes to fill. And then she walks away on her crutches, because she's still recovering from the accident.
Then Andy sees Miranda coming out of the building, and they look at each other from across the street. Andy nods and waves. Miranda kind of adjusts her glasses and gets into the car, but as Andy walks away, Miranda watches her and smiles. And she actually chuckles too, which we haven't heard this entire movie. And then she tells her driver to go, and she puts her sunglasses back on, and we watch Andy walk with a smile on her face. And Andy did not see any of this, by the way, but I just thought it was a sweet moment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was so funny. Meryl kept her character's sunglasses, and she wears them in Mamma Mia in the Money, Money, Money scene. And that's the end.
Yay!
That was so fun to watch. It was just a great rewatch.
Such a good cast, too. And it makes me so excited that they're talking about doing a sequel, because I just feel like we leave it and there's so much between those two, between Andy and Miranda, that I'm just like, this can't be done. It can't be done. I don't know what they would do, but it can't be done, you know?
I'm sure this has been in the works for a really long time, but coming off of the heels of a bunch of other sequel announcements or shows or that kind of thing, like Legally Blonde and more recently, I think Freaky Friday, this felt like a cash grab to me a little bit.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, now you're going to do a sequel when it's like the cool thing to do, you know?
Yeah. I'm still like, are they really doing it? Are they doing it? Like, I know that Disney, quote, confirmed that they're doing it, but here's why I say that. So Meryl Streep and Emily Blunt are confirmed for the sequel, supposedly.
Okay.
But Anne's involvement is still uncertain, which gives me pause because I can't imagine how they could do it without Anne Hathaway, or at least do it the way they would want to, you know, at the level they would want to. Apparently she's negotiated with them a few times over the years about doing this movie. And there were some ugly headlines that just came out this week that were like, Hathaway demands high salary for Devil Wears Prada 2, blah, blah, blah. It was like all about her asking for more money, which gives half a hate, in my opinion, where I'm just like, when have you ever seen Leonardo DiCaprio only agrees to do this movie for $10 million? It's like, never. The fact that they don't have her makes me think, I can't imagine them doing it until they actually have her locked in. So I'm not holding my breath yet.
And she deserves, I imagine, the high salary because apparently Meryl Streep did that for this movie.
Sure.
I don't know if she doubled her salary or what, but she did negotiate a very high salary because she was like, I'm going to bring that value to this movie.
Right, and she did.
And Anne would. So it's like,
makes sense.
I don't think that's like a diva move at all, but I love how headlines try to make it out to be a bad thing when a woman negotiates her worth.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What would it be about without her? Well, what would it be about with her, I guess?
So I read that it could be based on the book's sequel, which would make sense. And the sequel is called Revenge Wears Prada, The Devil Returns. And in the book, Andy and Emily reunite as top magazine editors when Miranda re-enters their lives. That was the little one-line synopsis that I read. So I think that would be really fun. I would love to see like an older Andy and Emily and then also have Miranda involved somehow. I think that would be, and that would also make the time jump make sense.
I like that, and I like that Emily and Andy respectively have grown in their careers. Because originally when they were talking about a sequel, I was like, okay, is Emily still going to be Miranda's assistant?
Is she going to be in the movie even?
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Now without Anne, I don't know, I guess it could just be about Miranda.
Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah, but then it wouldn't be based on the book. I just don't... that makes me think that you're right. Like, I feel like they were like, let's push this headline out that we're going to do a second one, and then maybe that will convince Anne Hathaway to, like, get on board. Because if there's, like, public support for it, and then go from there, I guess. I don't know. I don't know enough about how this stuff works, but I'm not holding my breath until we hear for sure that Anne Hathaway is going to be in it.
Yeah, and I'll still watch it, and I'll still be very excited when it comes out. I just do think we're kind of in, like, a sequel phase where everyone just wants to just remake everything that already exists.
Mm-hmm. Well, Inside Out 2, I feel like was the best performing movie of the year. I think over Dune.
Interesting.
Which I guess Dune was also a sequel. So I just think like...
True.
When it comes to new movies, unfortunately, I just feel like the big studios are just trying to put their money where they know it's going to work and pay off, as opposed to taking risks and doing new things. Unless, of course, you're A24.
Yeah, or you're Jordan Peele or you're somebody like that, you know?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that will be something to look forward to.
Well, thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening to our Podiversary episode.
Yay! And don't forget, we're going to have a bonus episode out this Friday answering all your questions.
And we're so excited. We're very thankful for you for listening for however long you've been listening for. It's just been an amazing year for us.
And we're excited for the next year. It's going to be great.
Woohoo! Many, many more movies to come. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.